Good evening and welcome to the second Audit and Governance meeting of this year. I'm Councillor Josh Williams, Member for Park Ward and Chair. I'm going to read out the webcast notice. I was going to skip the members of the public bit, but there is one. Hello, good evening. Please note this meeting is being filmed for live and subsequent broadcast via the Council's website. You should be aware that the Council is a data controller under the Data Protection Act. Data collected during a webcast will be retained in accordance with the Council's published policy. Members of the public seated in the public gallery will not ordinarily be filmed by the automated camera system, but please be aware that by moving forward of the pillar or in the unlikely event of a technical malfunction or other unforeseen circumstances, your image may be captured. Therefore, by entering the meeting room, you're consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. And welcome everyone tonight. I've got a quick chair's announcement, and then we'll move on to item one. I'll start with, I've been in discussion with officers from committee services to clarify the arrangements for public speaking in this committee. There is facility in our standing orders which permits public speaking. This would allow residents to contribute by speaking on individual items on the agenda, which is permissible for up to 5 minutes per item at the invitation of the chair. But I do note that public speaking must be in line with our Standing Order 36B, which allows any one member of the public to speak on one item only on any committee agenda, and that advance notice is encouraged but not required. So I'll follow Standing Order 36B and only allow each member of the public to speak on one item on the agenda. If advance notice is not practical prior to a meeting, I will expect residents to notify me at the start of the meeting as to which item they would like to speak on. I'm very unlikely to use my discretion to allow a member of the public to speak if they do so by calling out during the meeting. I thought that was worth putting on record and advising everyone the approach I'll be using when considering requests for public speaking in future. Thank you everyone for sitting through that. Item one, declarations of interest. Do we have any? None tonight, thank you. Item two, the minutes. Members were all present at the last meeting. Thank you very much. Are we happy to agree those minutes as accurate? Thank you very much. I'll sign those and pass them over. We don't have any questions from members of the public this evening. So we are on to item 4. The first report of the evening is the Internal Audit Quarterly Progress Report introduced by our Chief Auditor, Paul Harrington.
Thank you, Chair. So this is my standard quarterly reports, and it's covering those audits completed in the last quarter between July and September. So as always, the detail is in the appendix, Appendix 1. Also attached is Appendix 2, where we give a limited assurance opinion, or where we provide no assurance, then we attach the full audit report. So there is an extra appendix, Appendix 2 to the report. So I'm going to work on the assumption that the reports have been read. So I'll just quickly give you a very, very high level overview. So in terms of positive opinions, waste management operations, we concluded that it's a well-run service and was operating effectively. The governance in place for the use of agency staff, sickness absence monitoring, round allocations was found to be robust and operating well. Another positive review was rent accounting. Reported debt collection and recovery policies were in place, with debt monitoring and income collection regularly reported at management and committee level. Obviously, we looked at RBC properties and Homes for Reading properties. We did make recommendations in terms of the administration of rent accounting for Homes for Reading's properties, as there is some improvement required in that area, but overall the opinion was positive. There was a follow-up review of the local government transparency code and compliance with that code. So we noticed whilst good progress has been made since the last audit with regard to the 14 areas of information required by the code, there is still work to be done to be fully compliant in that area. So we're not completely there yet, but we're in a far better position than where we were when we last did a full detailed audit. In terms of freedom of information, again, this was another follow-up review. And again, good progress has been made, but there still remain some gaps in control. Processes are now more automated, guidance has been published, and performance monitoring has improved. However, notwithstanding this, performance across the council still remains disappointingly and sort of frustratingly low. We aspire to meet the 90% response rate, but we're roughly hovering around or 70% or slightly below 70%. But in terms of from an audit perspective, the processes have vastly improved. The one limited assurance opinion was deferred payments. Whilst the volume of reported deferred payment agreements is relatively small compared nationally and compared to the Berkshire area, it's not so much what we're reporting, it's what we're not reporting. And it's those which haven't become deferred payments, which we define as technically unsecured loans. And we found the whole process in terms of inadequate internal processes combined with poor communication and coordination between adult social care services and legal services has resulted in deferred payment applications not being processed on a timely basis. So that's one area we've given a limited assurance review, and as I say, that the full detailed report is attached in Appendix 2. In terms of the investigation side of the team, we've looked at give you a running commentary from the work we've done since April. So we've prosecuted one case so far this year for blue badge fraud. 5 cases have been sent formal warning letters, and 2 are still ongoing. Officers have commenced investigations into several referrals of tenancy fraud. 26 cases are ongoing at the moment. We've returned 3 properties back into stock since April 22, and we've also assisted in the return of 2 registered housing landlord properties. There's one ongoing direct payments investigation currently in progress, which is linked to potential money laundering offences. And in a separate case, the team are working with legal services to recover 16,000 in misused monies linked to an ongoing investigation, again into direct payment fraud. Also, the team have been looking at high value cost cases, doing some proactive work in adult social care direct payments, and we've recovered, recouped 51,000 out of a potential just short of 100,000. And we've also had 1 successful prosecution this year on fraudulent COVID business grant claim, with the defendant admitted to fraud by false representation and paid the 10,000 grant money, which was paid to them. That was repaid, and the defendant is now been handed a community order to undertake 100 hours of unpaid work. So the detail, as I say, the details in the appendix and Appendix 1. It also talk about where we are with the plan in terms of what we plan to do in quarters 1 and quarter 2. They just provide you an update of where we are with the audit plan and what we've got planned for quarters 3 and quarters 4. That's it. Any questions?
Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, we are asked to consider the report. Any comments, thoughts, questions? Down the line, no. Not tonight. I might say a few things then because oh, yes, please. Yeah. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you for the report. I just noticed in the sort of action plan attached to your report, if I'm not mistaken, about putting procedures in place. This is page 4 of 11 of the, sure it's the right bit, to the internal audit report. I'm talking about putting procedures in place by August to improve the procedures about the deferred payment scheme. I just wonder if that, are they in place now or likely to be in place soon?
So response to your question, I don't know, but wherever we give a limited assurance report, we will go back and follow up at some point. Also, the recommendations and the manager's response will be added to the audit tracker. So the recommendation owner has to provide an update to this committee. I'm not too sure whether those recommendations are on the tracker yet. I think they are. So if the manager has said they've been done and the target date was in August, then let's hope they've been done, but we will go back and follow up, and we will come back to the committee with the results of that follow-up.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? No, I'll chip in a little bit. There's quite a lot in the report, and two of the items refer to the information governance report later on in the agenda as well. We got 21 recommendations from our internal audit team across waste management, rent accounting, and the deferred payments. So I think they are on the tracker, but we can check later. But we're not quite getting like a live update prior to the meeting. So we will see those come through and the update from officers at our next audit and governance meeting. So it would be great if you could check them when they come through and see how they've been marked up. We've got two areas being followed up where the FOIs and the transparency code. I want to mention the transparency code briefly because I went through and reviewed it in June and the data was difficult to find on the council's website. And in a lot of cases, it had become out of date, either 12 months or 2 years. But reviewing it last week, having spoken to the internal audit team, it was all in the same place. It's all on the same page and all but 2 items were up to date, which is a great improvement, I think. And once all of those items are working their way through the system and being updated as standard, it'll all be there for everyone to see. So I thought that was excellent. Thank you very much. Obviously, there is more to do in that section. So I was a bit disappointed to see the original recommendations removed from the audit tracker as completed. So I think I'd like to see those reinstated for our next meeting to follow that work through. And my last thing to mention was the work investigation into the COVID grants, because I think it was earlier this year that a government minister resigned over inappropriate COVID loans. And yet our investigation into Reading's process has shown that we've been found to be compliant and in accordance with the conditions of all the funding and one successful prosecution. So I think that should give a lot of reassurance to this committee. Are we all happy with the recommended actions? Have we considered the report? We have. Thank you very much. Item 5 is the internal audit external quality assessment. Will that be introduced by Paul again?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So on page 47, so a professional, independent and objective internal audit service is one of the key elements of good governance as recognised throughout the UK public sector. The relevant internal audit standard setters adopted a set of public sector internal audit standards back in 2013, which applied to all internal audit service providers, whether in-house, shared services or outsourced. And the objectives of the standards are to define the nature of internal auditing, set the basic principles for carrying out internal audits, and establish a framework for providing internal audit services which add value, leading to improved organisational processes and operations, and establish the basis for the evaluation of internal audit performance. So the standards require an external assessment at least once every 5 years, which must be conducted by a qualified independent assessor from outside the organisation. This year we had CIPFRIN, Chartered Institute of Public Finance. They came in to do our external assessment. It was conducted week commencing 25th of April, so some 6 months ago. And it followed a process of interviews with internal audit staff, key officers within the council and Brighter Futures, members of both this audit committee and Brighter Futures audit committee, together with a review of key documents used. The assessment report shows that the council's internal audit function fully conforms to the requirements of the public sector internal audit standards, The assessor concluded that Reading Borough Council has a professional, well-respected internal audit service that is effective and not only follows best practice, but is in itself a good example of best practice in internal audit in local government. So I will be quoting that sentence or paragraph for the next 5 years. So from the evidence reviewed as part of the external quality assessment, no areas of non-compliance with the standards were identified, nor were any significant areas of partial non-compliance identified. Recommendations were made, and they were predominantly advisory recommendations. And one of the key areas was about succession planning and resilience, which I am looking to address going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, we are asked to note the outcome and confirm we are assured over the quality and effectiveness of the Council's internal audit service. Councillor Terry.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't doubt that Mr Harrington would draw our attention to paragraph 3.11, but I had it ready to point out if needed. Some of us just sat through a briefing session before committee where we talked about looking at other ways in which to assure ourselves about things. And of course, this is an example of external assurance to us that we have a professional and competent and well-run internal audit service. And so we can, use that third-party affirmation to assure ourselves that the reports that we get from Mr Harrington and his team are of good quality. I did have a small exchange with Mr Harrington about, succession planning. So we've had a chat about that. It's obviously one of those moments, really. He himself is a long-standing member of the council, as he told us earlier, but I knew anyway for some time. And it is always a concern that we might lose some good people simply by the fact that they eventually do have to be allowed to retire, I guess. But clearly, there is a difficult labour market out there in all sorts of ways, and we do wish him success in recruiting some more very good people. I've no doubt he will come up to scratch looking at the way in which you run your service. So thank you, Mr Harrington.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak? No, I mean, I'll just add that I think the reports we get are not just produced by a professional and experienced team, but they're produced in a clear, concise language we can understand, and that's no mean feat. And that's not always reproduced across every committee. And so I thank you for that. Are we all happy with the recommended actions? And I think we should note our thanks to our internal audit team. Thank you very much, everybody. Item 6 is the Strategic Risk Register. This next item is the new and improved Strategic Risk Register with introduction from I'm not sure who'll be. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. It's Robin Pringle here. So the report provides the updated Strategic Risk Register, which has come as it's normally reported to yourselves, and it's come about following the revised risk management policy and procedures. Where previous risk registers have reported on risks that have been managed over previous quarters, the new format is now also looking forward to risks that may be affecting the council over the coming months. You'll note that some of the older risks have been closed and removed. There are some risks that have been carried forward from previous risk registers. Some have been slightly amended, some of the older ones have been slightly amended. Plus there are a number of new risks that have been added to the Strategic Risk Register. There are also a number of emerging risks which aren't included on the risk register, but as you can imagine, we're keeping a very, very close eye on. Cost of living, that has evolved rapidly over the last few days since this report was written. There is a new protect duty that is due to come into force during this Parliament. We're waiting for more details on that as that passes through Parliament, and that will place responsibilities on those running public places and venues. So that includes the council as well as some of our business communities. And finally, it's not included in the report, but now there is work starting to work through the local resilience forums. Business continuity plans are asked to be reviewed because of energy security. there are risks because of the war in Ukraine and the effects that are likely to have on energy supply going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are asked to review and agree the council's risk register. We've got new and amended items. We've got a new format. I think we've got 15 risks identified in the report. I don't think we can meaningfully discuss each, but do members have any concerns or thoughts on the risk register in general and any specific risks they'd like to highlight? No, shaking heads. It's okay. Thank you very much. I think we've all read these in advance and received any briefings we required, so there's not always too much to discuss. I think all these risks are important. All of them could have huge impacts on our residents. I think one I'd like to highlight is the last one on the list, that the council could be unable to achieve the budget savings and manage its costs as a result of the cost of living increases, which we heard in the introduction. That score has risen from 8 6 months ago to 20. As it's not just residents that are bombarded by the inflation that's soaring and the energy costs, but the council as well. The national picture is, what's the word, uncertain, shall we say. And it notes, though, that reports are going to policy committee. Those reports now, should they require a decision, should come with a risk assessment, as we've seen that go through policy as well. So I think that's going to inform members. But obviously, we all hope there's a plan to deal with this current situation. Thank you very much. Are we all happy with the recommended actions? Thank you very much. I would have moved on to item 7, but the papers couldn't be prepared and published in time, so I'd like to propose we defer that one until our next meeting. Is everyone happy? Nods all round. Thank you very much. We'll defer that one till January, I think. And then we move on to item 8, the annual governance statement. And that is for the year just gone, 21-22, with an introduction from, is it Mike Graham?
It is.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. The annual governance statement is something which is required by the Accounts and Audit regulations, prepared every year and is submitted to the Audit and Governance Committee for their scrutiny. We've prepared the draft annual governance statement, which is with you and is attached to the report. You'll note that there are a number of items which are included within the governance statement, all of which have come from detailed assessments at departmental level about their own annual governance arrangements and action plans contained within directorates for various actions which are outlined in summary within the annual governance report. What should I highlight to you? I think I'll just leave it for questions, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I think we'll all have read this. We are asked to agree the statement and also grant delegated authority for any minor amendments that need to be made before that's signed. Do members have any comments or thoughts? Not this evening. Obviously, the reports we're getting are too clear and concise. So we don't have any questions. I think we're all happy. So yes, can we all agree the statement and the delegated authority? Nods all round. Thank you very much. Moving on through to item 9, which is the Information Governance Quarterly Update, with an introduction again from Mike Graham. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Yep. A couple of matters to draw your attention to in the report. Firstly, data transparency. Just picking up on the comment you made before, Chair, in relation to item 4 and the recommendations on the reasonable assurance report. So there are 2 management actions on those, which is about updating the policy and having that formally approved. So they have been done, and that was approved at CMT on the 30th of August. I'm just frantically checking to see where it was on the intranet, which was the final stage of the action being completed, but I can't find it. So, and the member of staff who would have done it was been off sick, so I'll chase it up. I think we're just about there on all those recommendations, so we can clear those off. I was interested to hear your comment that you found that perhaps 2 items of information may have slipped. So if you could tell me what they are offline, I'll very happy to pick those up, because it's we have agreed a process for keeping that up to date. So if things are slipping as soon as we put the things in place, then that would be a bad sign. So the other thing I'd just like to comment on in relation to data transparency, you remember there was a public question last time which asked about our approach to publishing data on salaries over £50,000, which seemingly required us to bring together data from disparate systems for all council employees above that salary threshold. We have been investigating that with HR colleagues and other local authorities, and we further examined the detailed guidance from the LGA. And we've identified that the wording of the code is recognised to be misleading, and that the LGA advises to view senior employees earning over £50,000 in accordance with the definition in the accounts and audit regulations. So that's not all employees over £50,000, it's only particular categories of employees. So in essence, what that means is we don't have to produce some detailed data sets for all of those people, and the breakdown by salary band that we currently show looks to be in accordance with what we're required to publish under the guidance. So I think we've cleared that one up. I will go back and double check with colleagues in HR about the way in which bonuses and benefits in kind are reported, but otherwise I think that the point which was raised by the public question has been substantially cleared up. Secondly, the other point I'd like to make on this report is in relation to freedom of information requests. Members will note that this report contains the data from Q1, which again I think we can say is disappointingly and stubbornly low. I have found, however, that the data in the report has got a formula error in it. So it's not 58% first quarter, it's 63. It's still rubbish, but it's just to point that out. I can see where someone's made the mistake on that calculation, but it's 63% compliance. When we discussed this last time, it was noted that we just had a recommendation come through from our audit colleagues with a reasonable assurance opinion and further recommendations about an action plan to be put in place to address this situation in the next 3 months. So we have put together that action plan, and that has been signed off by CMT. We've got a number of actions already underway on that. The essence of it is that we are communicating with all services across all parts of the council directly. We've been around all the director GMTs already, and colleagues have started visiting all the service teams meetings, and they are picking up any issues or concerns about how the policy is operated. They are bringing with them the new improved policy and procedure, which has been signed off by CMT. That is available on the council's intranet site. So we are finding things out which may be constraints, and those are all planned in for the rest of the autumn. So work has gone on with that. We've also got a comms plan in place, which is about publishing and keeping FOI compliance high on the agenda for staff internally. And we've also got a new reporting mechanism using Power BI. So we've got these kind of new, members can't see it all, but I've got copies here if anyone's interested, if you want to look at it, which means that through Power BI dashboards, we can send breakdowns to ADs for their service area by month showing compliance. So we've also been, as part of the action plan, cascading down the 90% compliance into AD's targets for next year, and we'll also be including them as requirements in their annual governance statements to show how they can assure in their own services that they can meet the 90% corporate requirement. So we've got quite a lot of things going on in relation to FII to address the problem areas, and as we indicated last time, and in accordance with the action plan, we propose to be coming back to January committee to give you an update on how it's gone, and hopefully we will see some further signs of improvement on the statistics. So those are the 2 points I wanted to raise with the Chair on that report.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that detail. What are we asked to do? Let's see. We are asked to note the progress and future actions and identify matters of interest for future reports. Members, any comments? Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the reassurance, Michael. Appreciate it. Appreciate the difficulty of getting on top of this. I just wanted to drill into the numbers for subject access request backlog a little bit. And Brighter Futures for Children particularly, they've only had 32 requests so far this year, only 38 for last year, and yet the backlog this year is almost double what it was last year. So I appreciate staffing issues are probably behind this and how long these take, but I'd like to hear some reassurance on that particular aspect is going to be focused on as a priority.
Yes, Chair, that is a priority. The Brighter Futures ones are probably the most difficult cases because they're the children's services records, some of which could be historical. So they are paper files which have to be brought back from archives, then they have to be digitized, and then because they're not in an electronic format, they're just scanned, they have to be manually redacted. So we are talking about weeks of work for one case, which is why the progress coming through is very slow. I've talked about the business case for the procurement of a system that's advanced. That should actually give us a really good saving in terms of staff time, but it should also improve the quality of the work that we're doing in terms of the redaction and the speed at which we can go through those records. So it will be, it's a system which involves a certain amount of machine learning. It can learn, if you've got historical records, templates of documents. So for instance, if children's services were using a form from years ago, it can learn the form. It will learn where the name was to blank out the name, even though it can't read handwriting, to blank out a name. And all this means is that we can then spend more of our time checking what's been redacted and quality assuring the fact that the redaction is ready to go out rather than the manual time of spending redacting it. So we're very hopeful that we'll be able to make some serious inroads into that as soon as we can get that software implemented. But it's currently in the position where it's ready to go out to market. We've done the soft market testing. We've shortlisted the people that we want to approach for tenders. And we're almost there.
Thank you. No, that's reassuring. It just struck me as, you know, the numbers coming in hadn't really moved, but the delay had risen, almost doubled in that particular instance. So, but I'm grateful for the explanation. Yeah,
it is about when they're it's about the difficulty of some of them and the size of some of them. And if you get a straightforward request for the council and it's a simple housing file or something, it's not as difficult to deal with. But if it is a complicated and big old children's standards case, then it's likely to be several files of information.
Thank you very much for that. Would anyone else like to question or comment? No, I'd like to just do a couple, I think, on the freedom FOIs. I'm not sure that I have understood why the figures are so low and have remained so low over time. And if I haven't understood why, then I'm not sure that I can understand why your action plan will address that. I wonder if that makes sense. Because the reason I ask is I think we're going to get a report back in January, and that'll be great. It'll be especially great if figures have moved up. But I think this has been going on for a couple of years now, probably pre-COVID. Do you have a sense for what the problem is that we're trying to fix here? It's not just looking at numbers. We can't just go 58%, 63%. What's causing those, and how will the plan hit that root reason?
We believe it's cultural, in the sense that people are busy in their day jobs. They've got vacancies they're holding in services. There are some real pressures out there, and FOIs, complaints, councillor inquiries all those things which are really important information rights topics are just perhaps viewed as something else which they've got to do, and there's a deadline to it. And that's the nut, I think, which we've got to crack. If you look back at all the things which were originally identified, going back to Mr. Harrington's 2019 report, all the management actions have been done. All the sort of change the structure, bring the team together, introduce some software, get a proper policy together, all those tangible things we've done, but they haven't made any impact. So now we're thinking, well, it's about communications, and that's why a lot of the action plan of the autumn is about engagement with the teams to see, right, well, how far are our communications hitting home? What else is out there that we don't know is the reason why some of these things are taking some time? You know, for instance, some of the things which have come back from the early meetings have been about delays that people have had when it's been sent to the wrong person, but the wrong person doesn't quickly realize that it's for them to send it back to where it should have been, so it can be redirected on time. At that point, we've lost the 10 days. So there's something about communicating with people to make sure that they are checking fairly quickly whether or not it's something they can deal with, and trying to get it off their desk if it isn't something that they have got the information on, to make sure we find the right home for it as quickly as possible if we haven't got the right home. And we are building up a better picture of the responders in departments, who are the people who are most likely to be dealing with a number of different FOIs under different topics. And we're also, in accordance with the Transparency Code, trying to encourage people who are responding or have got difficulties in responding to identify data sources which we can proactively publish on our website, so they can avoid FOIs altogether. And that's really our sort of offer to the services. If you're busy, just identify where commonly requested data is held. We'll work with the web team to get it published for you periodically, add it to our publication scheme, and then the central team can just divert the requests away from you in the first place. They'll just deal with them centrally because they know where the data is there. So that's what we're sort of going out with an open hand to say, tell us what the problems are, but also we've got a solution if you'd like to join in. We might be able to help each other. The other thing that we're looking at, and we've discussed in our own service, is we've got an opportunity with the new casework and customer relationship management platform that the council is buying, to think again about the system which we're currently using, because it's an off-the-shelf module. If the off-the-shelf module workflow it has got some quirks to it, if it's something which we can redesign in the new system, then perhaps we'll have another go at redesigning the system if we can really work out the needs and the pain points of the responders in the services, so we can make something work better for them. So we've got a number of thoughts across a number of different areas about where it's likely to be, and that's why the action plan is very much focused on engagement and communication. Okay. We've been through I think I mentioned this last time at the July committee. The Information Commissioner's Office publishes a very helpful toolkit self-assessment, and you can go through that, and it goes through about 5 or 6 different elements in detail, and you can assess yourself against it to work out where your root cause. It's like a root cause analysis tool, basically, and that root cause analysis tool has led us to the thought that we haven't really got anything systematic or structural wrong. It probably is around the culture and the communication, and that's where we focused.
Thank you very much indeed. Also, I should have thanked you more for the Transparency Code data, because although I did see a couple of areas that needed updating, it's a huge improvement over space. And obviously that should, over time, divert FOI requests to data that you're just publishing on a timely basis. Whether that's impossible to measure or not, I don't know, but hopefully that will work. Members, anything else? No. And then thank you very much for that report and update. What were we were asked to note the progress and identify matters of interest for future reports. I think at the moment the matters of interest are those which were contained in this report, so we expect to see updates in January. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mike. We'll move on to item 10, Q1 Performance and Monitoring Report. Oh, Okay. Item 10 is that report. I'm going to ask Mr. Carter for a brief introduction shortly, but this was the same report exactly as was received at policy earlier this month. As far as I'm aware, it raised no questions or objections or particular discussion, and it was happily agreed at that committee. So I've raised that fact with officers that this is double work for both officers and members alike, and I don't like double work. I don't see the value of it coming to two committees in exactly the same format, two committees just a few days apart as well. It is coming to Audit and Governance at the moment at the request of the previous chair. I personally don't see any need for this to be brought to two committees. I think policy committee is the correct, well, some of you are all on policies. I think policy is the correct place for the reading and discussion of this report. So we will have a brief introduction because it was on our papers. Members can say anything they want, but unless anyone objects, I intend to request that this no longer comes to two committees, no longer comes to Audit and Governance and remains on policy. So we'll have a very brief introduction if we can, because it was on our papers for this evening.
Yes, so thank you. I mean, as you said, it's the same report that I presented to Policy Committee last week. I think it is just worth mentioning that when I presented the report last week, I did talk about the challenge of producing financial projections in the current economic climate. And I think I highlighted two examples last week, one of which was the pay award, which hadn't yet been approved. Of course, we've now got the vote back from Unison members to say that they have accepted it, but we haven't got the results from the other two TUs yet. I also mentioned that the Monetary Policy Committee was meeting the next day, and we may well see a movement in the Bank of England base rate. Well, we did. It was increased by 50 basis points. I didn't highlight the potential for the national insurance increase to be reversed because I had no idea that that was coming. But that has now happened since the report. So that's just an example of the sort of volatility that we're working in at the moment. So my team are working through the financial implications of each of those decisions, and will include the results of those in the Q2 budget monitoring report that will go to Policy Committee in December. Having said that, I think the really good highlight is still that even given all of the volatility, the projection at the moment is that we will be able to deliver services within budget. So having said that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Yes, does anyone have any comments or questions? Councillor Emberson.
Not on the actual report, it was just in relation to the duplication. If I remember rightly, I think there was a reason Councillor Stevens had said, I think somewhere it says that it should track to this committee. So if officers can just check, that's not necessary before we break any standing order or whatever it might be. Thank you, Chair.
No, you're quite right. We've had a read through the standing orders. I can't find anything that brings this. It didn't come for a number of years, 16, 17, 18, 19, but what, roughly speaking, but what was coming at the request of the chair. And the chair may have thought it was valuable at the time. It may have been a temporary request, but members will all groups are represented on policy. And so obviously the report will still come. Yeah, but you're absolutely right. If there is a confusion of standing orders and it is indeed intended to come to both, we'll hopefully amend those standing orders at some future time rather than just cheat them. Councillor Terry.
I suppose I just wanted to add, because I was thinking about what you said and completely understood it, and then went, what about the risk register and what it says about finance and all those things? And if we don't take this report, we make council officers write another report, you know, to monitor risk at some point. So it just feels like it doesn't feel like it's a problem for me to track it through. Because if there was anything that came up, there's the report in front of us to have a more detailed discussion about any concerns that there might be. I'll just ask you to reflect again, because I understand your initial point, and I, you know, on the face of it, went, yeah, okay. And then quickly went, I don't think it really matters whether it's supposed to come here or not. I think there may be an issue that says if it doesn't, whereas this committee kind of checking up on the savings targets, whereas this committee checking on the PIs, for example, in terms of just an audit function of governance, that, you know, that they're not just being nodded through policy committee. I know that that wouldn't happen, Chair, but just in case, I just think we reflect on that, and maybe talking to Mr. Carter and others, you could come to a view about that, and you may decide, as it's written anyway, maybe it wouldn't hurt that it's here to talk about, or if not, we can just go, nobody raised anything at policy, we're not bothered either, as a, you know, just so that it's done. That's all I would reflect on, because I...
Thank you very much, Councillor. Yeah, you're quite right, we should reflect. Councillor Mitchell and then Councillor Gittings.
Thank you, Chair. Just to endorse what Councillor Terry's just said, yes, completely understand. There's no point in make work schemes doubling up. But this committee, you know, there are 8 members of us. We are much more focused on these reports and have the time and space to discuss, analyse and question officers. We have that capacity at policy, but as one item amongst many, it may not get quite the level of scrutiny by the wider committee membership that those of us in A&G should have. So perish the thought that anything gets nodded through on policy, of course, but I don't see this. Yeah, it's belt and braces, but
Okay.
if your belt falls down, it's good to have your braces.
Thank you very much. I'm not picking up the best picture of policy committee, but Councillor Gittings.
I was going to sort of mirror what others have said. I think the other important thing to, and I'm all against duplication if it can be avoided. Particularly, obviously, we saw quite a long agenda. I mean, we were through it tonight, but other times, you know, you could be a long time poring over these items, which is what our role is. I mean, policy committee is essentially for leaders of groups, plus obviously so lead members, audit and governors. You have got more representation from the parties, but also what I call backbench members. So on the fire authority, which I also sit in, you have a management committee that sits and makes decisions, and you have an audit and governance committee that scrutinises those decisions to make sure that we've done things in good order, and occasionally would raise issues and bring them back to the full authority. So I guess I'm sort of kind of arguing against, you know, the idea of getting rid of duplication. I think we do need to have a bit of a look at this before we make that decision, just to check that we're not opening up some loophole in the standing orders as well.
Thank you very much, everyone. Those are all wise comments. Thank you very much. We shall reflect on them. I'll ask officers for their opinions outside of the meeting, so we're not taking up our time this evening. So on that, though, members, any thoughts on the report itself? No, didn't think so. Right. Yes. What shall I say before we conclude? We need to note the report, and we're going to vote on that in 1 second. I will consider whether it should remain on speak to officers, and I might put round a few notes to members before making any request one way or the other, and that way we can have maybe an offline discussion. Happy to note the report. Thank you very much. Item 11 is the audit recommendations tracker, with an introduction from, is it back? Oh, I don't know. Did you draw a short straw? Okay, with an introduction from Darren Carter.
Okay, so this is the regular report to Audit Committee about progress on the implementation of the audit tracker recommendations. At the last meeting of the committee, members requested that additional columns be added to the appendix to include details of the original target implementation date. This has now been done, so that information is included in the report tonight. There are now 91 recommendations on the tracker, including 13 new recommendations that have been added since the last report, including for confirmation the recommendations from the deferred payments and rent accounting reports that were discussed as part of Paul's internal audit quarterly report earlier. So you will see updates from the relevant officers in the appendix. 5 of the actions are now recorded as being complete, 29 are green, 42 are amber and 15 are red. However, the inclusion of the additional information in the appendix about the original implementation date means that we now need to review some of the RAG ratings that have been applied, because I'm not convinced that they've been applied consistently in accordance with the stated policy that we've included in the report. So my apologies that that review wasn't done ahead of this meeting, but it will be done ahead of the next meeting in January. So I'll lead on that personally. So having said that, I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you very much indeed. Members were asked to consider the report. Do you have any comments or thoughts? I think just from me briefly, as we can see here, individual recommendations moving through the system. And if members are keen to track the interesting ones from previous reports, then I think that'll be really valuable, and keep an eye on those as they go through. And we can also see a direction of travel of how many are red, how many are green, how many are amber. And there may be some readjustment required for the next report, so we might see a different direction of travel then. So I think those are the two interesting things it tells us. So members, any comments or questions on the audit tracker? No, not this evening. We also have the power as a committee to ask an officer to attend future audit and governance meetings to explain their area and whether they're meeting or failing to meet any of these audit requirements. Has anyone spotted any areas that concern them this evening? No, officers are off the hook for now. I think once we see potentially a number of these changing to a different RAG rated status, we may see a different direction of travel, and we may start to group those together by directorate and see perhaps some areas are doing better than others. But I think we'll maybe focus in on that at the next meeting. Thank you very much. Are we okay to note the report? Thank you very much, everybody. Item 12, the accounts update with an introduction from Mark Sanders. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. So, short update to the accounts process to go through tonight. We'll be going through updates for 19, 20, 20, 21 and 21, 22 processes. Since last committee met, we've been very busy. We've been multitasking, which is a very strange thing for me to do personally. But I mean by that we've been finalising the 1920 accounts process. We've also begun the external audit process of the 2021. So that audit fieldwork started at the beginning of August. We've been supporting that work. And we've also been working on the preparation of the 2021 statement of accounts, which as of yesterday has been published on our website in accordance with our timetable and our planning. The public inspection period, which is 30 working days, will begin from today, and that process is now live. The 1920 work, we will continue to respond to audit queries. We've made adjustments throughout the period as they've been found. These are matters of technical adjustments throughout the accounts, and in making those changes, we therefore ensure that our accounts are of suitable audit quality, and those changes have been reflected in latter years' accounts. The detail for the audit fieldwork will be contained in the next item on the agenda tonight from external audit report. So I'm happy to take any questions, probably in a little bit more detail in relevance to the external auditor's report would be better placed. The 2021 accounts is a significant milestone. We're committed now that they are published to deploy all my resources to support the audit fieldwork of 2021. That is underway. There are no significant issues arising to date in that process, and we continue to work closely each week. We're actually meeting twice a week just to discuss any matters arising and ensure there's a steady workflow of provision of information and evidence for external auditors to support their fieldwork. The 21-22 accounts can now begin. We have closed the management accounts predominantly for 21-22 year, so we can now look to preparing the statutory adjustments and valuation entries, etc. in the accounts. So our plan is to prepare the draft 21-22 accounts, which I aim to publish around the end of December. If I can bring them to this committee in doing so, I will do that in draft form. And as we look forward to next calendar year, I'll be looking to bring the draft 22-23 accounts to next May's committee, next May-June committee date, it might be June, with a target that we're aiming for audited accounts all up to date by around September 23. If we do that for next summer and September, we'll be back up to date. And that's been a significant effort by both the internal finance team in Reading, but also, and my thanks will go to work with the external auditors as well, who have continued to match our confidence and our deployment of resources to bring our accounts up to date. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that. Members, do we have any comments or thoughts or questions? If not, we've got some shaking heads. I might just say a couple of things. I think two things are really significant, and I offer my thanks. And the first is the fact that within a year from now, you could be back on track, which must represent an enormous amount of work. So my thanks for that. And if we achieve that, it will be amazing. And the other is the milestone of publishing the draft accounts, which was yesterday, just before the meeting. Very good. Thank you very much. No. And again, thank you very much for that. I think that's a significant milestone as this authority moves towards being back on track. I've read through the report. I think I understand it. I think we've all read that. We're asked to note the progress. No comments. Shall we note that? Thank you very much, members. Okay, we're going to move on now. I guess we may have some more detailed questions because we now get to focus in on the draft audit results report, which is item 13 on our papers, which is for the 19-20 accounts, with an introduction from EY, although we have someone on the screen and someone in the room.
If I may just, Chairman, I'll just introduce myself to new members who haven't met me. So my name is Maria Grindley. I'm your audit partner with Ernst & Young. I'm actually going to ask Adrian to take you through this item as he is in the room, so that makes more sense. But clearly I'm here for any questions you may have, but I'll hand over to Adrian.
Thanks, Maria. So just in terms of reports and context, so I think the last formal report that came to this committee was in April. That again was a very draft audit results report. So since then, as Marcus said, there's been a significant amount of work completed and a really high degree of engagement with both teams. I would say we have bi-weekly meetings, and that's attended by both Darren and Mark, and that really helps drive forward any particular issues we have. And again, that's kind of very much appreciated because as we're trying to kind of work through these things together, it kind of makes such a difference having that level of engagement. So in terms of the report, so this is, as I say, it's the draft audit results report for 1920. We've included blue text for the purpose of facilitate an easier review for members and officers. As I say, since then, we've included a number of areas. I'll just talk the committee through some of the key areas of the report. So as Mark has highlighted in his report on agenda item 12, there's been a key issue around infrastructure assets. So we've kind of highlighted that at page 187. And again, we're working through a technical paper that's been presented to us by officers to kind of understand the potential impact for the council. And again, we'll kind of liaise with them as we kind of work through that with our technical team. As I say, it's a national issue, it's affecting probably 95% of councils, and a number of those are actually waiting until a potential statutory override. But the council have presented a paper which may mitigate the issue, and we're trying to work with our technical team to try and understand that. We've then worked through on page 197, 198, an update on the pension liability. Is a significant liability figure within the financial statements, similar to most councils. We do note there kind of the work, that work is complete. We note some of the adjustments, both corrected and unadjusted, that we've concluded on. And again, from the work concluded, there's no material issues that we need to flag to the council. In terms of page 200, we have a couple of risks there around the group position. officers and members are familiar with the kind of group structure. So we need to do quite a bit of work around the consolidation and some of the entries and adjustments that come into that. We're in the final stages of that consolidation work, so we're hopeful that that's going to be concluded very soon, and that'll then hopefully give us a good position in terms of coming up and concluding on the group position. Page 201, we report on the PFI. So at the last committee, we reported that our internal PFI expert was still concluding that work. We're happy to conclude that his review is concluded. He's concluded that actually that both models, both the housing and the waste models, continue to be code compliant and materially correct. So that's a good position to be in, and gives us good assurance moving forward into future years. Page 207, 208, we talk through the agreed adjustments, both adjusted and also unadjusted. The unadjusted for us are considered to be immaterial. We highlight them there for reference to the committee, so there is full visibility of the adjustments that have both been put through and also are currently unadjusted. On page 219 to 226, we list some of the control deficiencies and observations that we've identified during the audits. I'm happy to conclude that actually the majority of those are updates from 2018-19, with just a few minimal ones coming through for 1920. And then just the last one I'd like to kind of highlight to the committee is just page 246 to 250. That's the letter of representation. So coming towards the end of the audit, this is the formal letter of representation, which is signed by the chair on behalf of the committee. There are some important representations in there, so it's just to make the committee aware and highlight that. That is a key assurance that we get at the very last stage of the audit. So I just wanted to kind of bring that to the attention of the committee. It is fairly consistent with what's happened in previous years, but again, because there's some new members, it's kind of important that people are aware, or the members are aware that actually that's the kind of last formal process. And obviously, as we get to the conclusion of the audit, I will then look for formal sign off of that from both Section 151 and the chair of the committee. But I'll probably stop there and take any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you very much indeed. Do we have any questions or need for clarification on any of those, or any thoughts? Not this evening. Thank you very much. Let's try and see if I can marshal any of my own thoughts, as I have to put a signature to. I think, yeah, I will say a couple of things. I think first of all, we received the update report, and it was great to have the sections highlighted in blue so we could cut to the updated sections, and I think that was very useful for members. We've all had time to consider that, but there's a sense that as we're looking back in time, and this must be difficult for our audit teams as well, we all know, because we have lived through it, that things have moved on, and so looking back at a snapshot from previous years, it presents challenges, I think, and I think it's worth noting that it's challenging for our auditors and it's challenging for members as well to think back and be happy that that information from back then is correct. We don't have any concerns at the moment as a committee, so I hope that we are content with noting the report and the updates this evening. Now, last meeting, we delegated authority to Mr. Carter to sign these accounts off, and myself on behalf of you. So if anyone has any concerns, do raise them. I'll be working through with officers to gain their advice prior to any signature. But if members are worried they haven't had a full range of information in order to be happy, now is a good time to shout. If you are all content that you've received all the information you need, are we happy to note this report? Nods all round. Thank you very much, everyone. I think that concludes in that case. Thank you for waiting to the end to do that. Thank you very much for dialing in as well on the big screen. Thank you. Thank you everyone for attending tonight. The next meeting is the 24th of January. So have a nice Christmas. And see you all in a new year. And the meeting is closed.